This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. Is Todd Monken's honeymoon period over now with this whole Deshaun Watson situation? Obviously, he had to make a very unpopular decision, or he made a unpopular decision to start Deshaun Watson for the upcoming season. Now, there's a lot of different reactions to this, right? Some people are keeping Todd out of it, even though I could tell you right now, he's definitively the one who's making the decision for who the starting quarterback is going to be by saying Jimmy Haslam is forcing the quarterback situation to be what it is, or that Andrew Berry's putting his thumb on the scale, and it's not a reflection of what Todd Monken wants. But Todd Monken has made this very clear. Todd Monken has made this clear the whole time. Todd Monken has even said he wouldn't have taken this job if he couldn't choose his quarterback, right? Or be in charge of the quarterback situation, or be in charge of situations like this. He is the one who is making the decision to start Deshaun Watson. And that is something that obviously was unpopular with a lot of Browns fans for a lot of different reasons. My question is that really a bad thing? That's what we'll examine in this video. But before I do that, I got to thank my sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 sports app. The app is really easy to use for player picks. Just pick more or less for a few player stats and lock in your lineup. That's it. Rather just pick teams. Well, PrizePicks has that now too. Just pick the winner, spread, or total in any game or fight. PrizePicks is available in most states, including California, Texas, and Florida. Plus, you can even follow me on the app at Quinn_C and tell my picks with one click, and follow your friends too. Speaking of my picks, here they are. Myles Garrett over 15.75 sacks. 16's been his baseline the last few years. I'd be very surprised if he goes to LA and that number drops, given that he's going to see more passing attempts, given that LA's offense is better than what the Browns have been. Quincy Judkins, 924 yards. They had two really good picks for Quincy here, 6 touchdowns or 924 yards. I feel comfortable taking more on both, but 1,000 yards feels like a safer bet for Quincy. I think he's going to have a big year this year. Carson Schlesinger, 2.25 sacks. I'm saying more. Remember, Mike Rutenberg likes to blitz his linebackers a lot more than the previous defensive coordinator the Cleveland Browns had. Also, Carson Schlesinger is probably going to have to get involved as a sack producer to make up for the hole that they're going to have to make up for Myles Garrett. And then Shedeur Sanders starting more than 7.5 games. I think he'll be the starter, play about 8 games or more this year, but that's my picks for this season. Best of all, play your first $5 and get $150 in lineups if you win. Just use the promo code HMA when you sign up. Again, that's your first $5 and get $150 in lineups if you win when you use the promo code HMA. PrizePicks has switched up their offer. There's no better time to join, lock in, and win that first lineup. Now, what does the end of a coach's honeymoon period really mean as far as how it changes their job? What it means is that there's going to be more scrutiny, not too much more scrutiny, but just more scrutiny, more questioning of decisions that Todd is making or Todd has made in the past. A great example of this is one element of Todd Monken that I don't think enough people have really thought about. And again, just because I'm saying you have to think about this doesn't mean it's necessarily going to end up being a bad thing for Todd Monken. And please remember that this is a nuanced conversation. But one element of this Todd Monken hire that I don't think has been discussed enough is the fact that he does not have a lot of deep and long form relationships with a lot of the coaches on this roster. And we have seen in Cleveland, when coaches are put together and they don't have a long history together, there can sometimes be issues there. Now, sometimes it works out. Jim Schwartz and Kevin Stefanski were put together by Andrew Berry, who had all the connection with Jim Schwartz. They were put together, and it worked out great between those two for a period of time. And when it fell apart, it really wasn't because Jim Schwartz was doing anything negative to the offense or impacting Kevin Stefanski's ability to do his job. We've also seen this be a complete disaster. The biggest example of this goes back to 2018, my bad, when the Browns hired Todd Haley. Now, the reason the Browns hired Todd Haley is simple. Jimmy Haslam comes from the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, or at least he started with Pittsburgh. He has an affection for Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Todd Haley was successful with the Steelers. After a while, he became available, and the Browns seized on that opportunity, despite the fact that, Hugh Jackson was an offensive head coach. And that was a disaster of a situation so bad that when the Browns fired Hugh Jackson halfway through the season, they had to fire Todd Haley too, because Todd Haley was in the middle of trying to start a coup while Hugh Jackson was trying to take over, was still coach the team while he had the job. We have seen this go a number of ways here in Cleveland. And what we have with this staff, especially if you look at the defensive staff, are a lot of guys from the last coaching staff, which is usually kind of a red flag. Now, we like all the coaches that the Browns retain, and we're hoping that all of these guys are professionals, and they seem to be professionals. So I'm not going to go full red flag here, but sometimes that can present issues when you have a new head coach dealing with guys who were here with the last guy, right? Sometimes it works out great. Sometimes it doesn't, right? Jason Tarver, on a smaller scale, he was here with Joe Woods, and then Joe Woods got fired. He stayed, and he was here with Jim Schwartz, and that worked out beautifully for both of them. There have been other examples of times where, it hasn't really gone as well. The Browns coaching staff is full of these kind of things because the philosophy behind hiring Todd Monken wasn't that the Browns needed a complete overhaul from how they run the team. It was that they needed to tweak the system just a little bit. And when you're trying to tweak the system and not change it entirely, you're going to keep a lot of the parts that were in the last system. So Todd's here to tweak it and adjust it to get it to where they want it to be offensively and match where they were defensively. This has meant that Todd's working with some guys that he probably met this summer when he hired him. And right now, during camp, that's not going to be much of a problem, right? Todd is running a competent camp. Most of these coaches are just trying to get their feet wet, confident in what they're doing, and get their guys up. Camp's not the place where this is going to pop up. Where this would pop up is when there are inevitable bumps in the road during the season, when guys that some of the coaching staff are pounding the table for to play aren't playing well, and then Todd has to make a decision, right? Like, that's where that natural friction comes from. Decisions like that, things like that. We don't necessarily know how that's going to play out because this dynamic with these guys, especially on the defensive side of the ball, really hasn't been tested as much. On the offensive side, where we got a couple of guys from Baltimore, Travis Weiser running the offense, you think that there's going to be more of a copacetic situation there with Todd and guys he's worked with before. But really, it's on the defensive side where a lot of these guys are people that Todd is working with for the first time in his career, and they're working with Todd for the first time in his career. Again, it doesn't mean it's not going to work, but it does mean that it's something we should pay attention to during the course of the season and see if it pops up during the year as an actual legitimate problem, because he just doesn't know these guys, and we don't know how they're going to react. It's an unknown at this point. Another thing that I think is going to be an interesting thing to talk about during the course of the year is something that Todd has been praised on, right? And I think for good reason. Todd's press conferences are more informational, more entertaining than what Kevin Stefanski's press conferences were, for certain. But the way that those press conferences feel and are perceived is going to change greatly by what the Browns' record is. And while it's fun now in training camp when the team is 0-0, that Todd handles these press conferences in this way, is that going to become a problem if the team's record is less than desirable at some point in the season. Obviously, there are going to be people who don't like the press conferences when the team's bad, no matter what the press conference is like. But does his brutal honesty start to turn into things that make guys in the locker room upset when they hear it, or turn into stories that can become distractions at points in the season? You know, it's all fun to have somebody who likes to talk and who's informational at these press conferences, but it's real easy to say the wrong thing one time at a press conference and that to become a big deal, right? If you're in Cleveland, think about it like this. Kenny Atkinson, right? He's usually a good press conference. He's usually pretty informative at his press conference, pretty willing to talk. And then after a game versus the New York Knicks, he opened his mouth and said something that made sense to him but did not make sense to the rest of the world, which is, if you look at this series analytically, we won. And that has been a quote that people are never going to let go. Stuff like that can happen, right? When you're more willing to talk to the press, more free to speak to them. You could slip up, say something that doesn't come out right, even though it came out right in your head, and it becomes a thing. And with Todd, that's certainly more of a possibility than it ever was with Kevin Stefanski. It's not a certain possibility, but it's certainly more of a possibility. Honestly, there's already been a couple of quotes where if Todd was in a place where the media was less charitable to him, he would have got lit up, right? But fortunately for Todd, he said those when the media was more in a giving mood with him. If it gets to a point where they don't have as much patience for him, then that could become an issue. Why is it that I think that the honeymoon period ending for Todd Monken is a good thing? The reason I think it's a good thing is because I don't think scrutiny is inherently bad. I don't think pushback is inherently negative or hating on somebody. I think that they are all natural and normal parts of a functioning ecosystem. In order for Todd to have an accurate picture of what the public is feeling, in order for Todd to have an accurate picture on what his team is feeling, people need to be able to be honest with him. People need to feel free to be honest with him. And when you're in a situation where everybody's kissing your butt and telling you all the things that you want to hear, you're not going to have a clear picture of what's in front of you, and you're going to step right into a landmine, right? So for Todd, yeah, this is an eye-opening situation. He's going to be scrutinized for this situation. There are going to be people who hold this situation against him and hold him accountable, rightfully so, for making the decision to start Deshaun Watson for what happens when Deshaun Watson is out there. But the good news is that that pendulum does swing both ways. If Todd is making decisions that work out for this team in the long run, then people are also going to hold him accountable and responsible for those things, which would be to his benefit. If Todd is making decisions that don't make the team better and work out to make the team worse, then obviously Todd's going to be criticized for that. But is that not right? Is that not the right thing to do? Is that not proper if he's not doing a good job to be criticized for that? That Todd's going to have to deal with some scrutiny. People are going to ask him hostile questions. The environment for these press conferences at some point is going to become a lot more hostile than it is. The environment for Todd Monken is going to become a lot more hostile than it is at some point. And it's better that Todd be aware and prepare for that than him be in a bubble. So yes, the honeymoon period is over for Todd Monken. People are now comfortable criticizing Todd Monken, and the conversation of him not being Kevin Stefanski is no longer really that relevant with Todd anymore. But that's not a bad thing. I think that'll allow us to evaluate Todd more accurately, which means, hey, when he does something bad, it's definitely going to be talked about. But when he does something good, he will get the right amount of credit for those things. So that's my take on it. Todd Monken's honeymoon period is over, but it's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. It's just a natural thing. Honeymoon period's end. Doesn't mean the end of a relationship, right? Every marriage has a honeymoon period. And every marriage has the honeymoon period end. And then that's when the actual marriage starts, right? And a lot of marriages are successful after that point. Just because the honeymoon period's not going to last forever does not mean that Todd's not going to be here for a while. It could be the case that he's gone by the end of the season. It could be the case that he's here for the next 10 years. We'll see what outcome plays itself out during the course of the season. But that's my take on it. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.